How do you get the is the camera on?
I'm going to go ahead and can everyone mute themselves first to make sure that we're not getting any background noise first? Okay. All right. All right, so welcome everybody to our mixed residential community zoning meeting. So tonight we're going to talk about specifically the mixed residential zoning that is in Ward 6 and Ward 1. Molly and John are consultants who have been working on the zoning code update. You may have seen them in some previous zoning code videos. And so I kind of will pretty much let them go at it and do a presentation. And the way that we kind of have it structured for tonight, I was going to let Molly and John kind of do a quick overview of what's proposed with the mixed residential. And then I had some people email me with comments that they would like me to read. So I'll read those. Most of them are pretty short. And then I will let those who have emailed me, who have asked to speak, I will let them go. We don't have any time limit that we put on anyone, but just so be cognizant of kind of your time and making sure that you're sharing the floor with everybody while you're talking and not taking up too much time so that everyone has a chance to kind of communicate and participate. And then for everyone who's watching on YouTube, I am going to turn the live chat on in a second. And so I will be moderating that and kind of following along. So if you have any questions for the consultants that you want me to ask or bring up in the meeting, just put it in the live chat. I will be monitoring that, or you can also email me at klabbe, KLABBE @geneva.ny.us throughout the meeting. I will also be checking that. So don't feel like if you didn't sign up to speak that that's the only way that you can communicate. We have a couple different ways of doing it. And again, Molly and John, this meeting is really for them to kind of get feedback on what everyone's thinking about the mixed residential zoning. They are not the end all be all deciders on the mixed residential. This is just one of several things in our zoning code update that has kind of been flagged for council decision. So ultimately it will be council's decision on what to do with this zoning, as there are several pieces of the zoning code that are like that as well. So I will pass it over to Molly and John, and Molly, I'll let you should be able to screen share, but let me know if you're running into any issues.
All right, John, can you see it? Everyone else? Yeah.
Okay, I'm good, thank you. Hopefully everyone else can see it. Katie, not if you can see it. Good. I just want to say a few words before we get started and talk clarification and content and get in the weeds. One, thank you for joining us tonight. We really do like what we do. Molly and I are zoning geeks, so any opportunity to have a dialogue with people that are going to be impacted by the codes we're working on, we welcome the opportunity. We think it's important, and conversations like this invariably make the product that the city council will be considering at some point in the future better. So thank you for being part of the process and taking time out of your day to meet with us this evening. We really do appreciate it. So one of the things that when we came to this project, and I'll talk about the city's comprehensive plan in a minute, so that between the comprehensive plan and then actually, I believe the RFP that the city had for solicitation of the services talked about, they wanted different ideas and approaches to this area of the city in terms of potential for different living options, different residential settlement patterns, and things of that nature. So after, I lose track of how long we've been at this, at least a year or so of working closely with staff, stakeholder groups, some public meetings, pivoting because of COVID, this is the option that's currently out for comment and review. When it comes to zoning, it's a spectrum of ideas and opportunities and techniques. So the opportunities are truly infinite. for, zoning provisions and zoning considerations. So this is the culmination of a lot of thinking and effort on a lot of people's behalf. This isn't necessarily our proposal. This is more of a distillation of what we've heard, combined with our skill set on what seems to make sense to some people in the city of Geneva to consider. Next slide, Molly. So let's talk about the AR district for a little bit. Hold on, I got to move my faces because I can't see the slide. So let me move my people here. Thank you. So just some deep thoughts based on our experience in New York State, based on our colleagues' experience around the country. But let's just stick to upstate New York. I mean, when you think about upstate New York in the last 15 to 20 years, housing demand and housing choices have really changed, I feel, relatively dramatically. I know when I moved home from Virginia 20 plus years ago, there were still large single family subdivisions being built by the hundreds, literally 50, 60, 100, 200 units at a time, homes on half acre to 1 acre lots. And probably 15-ish years ago, that started to slow down. And you started to see more patio home developments and attached townhouses and things of that nature. And as the baby boomers got older, they had different housing demands and different housing desires. And so what that led to across the country and in most parts of upstate New York, downstate a little differently, closer to New York City, especially with COVID, they're still getting some of those. But housing demand in our neck of the woods has really shifted from large lot single family homes to something smaller, something more manageable, something, lower maintenance, less yard to mow, less house to maintain. So you've really seen this increased demand for smaller type of homes, as well as different living arrangements. Like I said, whether it's apartments, condos, some attached housing, things of that nature has really gone down. The demand for single family has gone down, but this middle housing, condos, townhouses, things of that nature have gone up. So people are looking for smaller living arrangements that are in closer proximity to goods and services and potentially sidewalks and things of that nature. So, and when you look at the area that you guys live in, you've got to start to consider a lot of the residential from our perspective and our thoughts. A lot of the properties along the road frontages, not all, but a lot of the properties along SLOSSON, for example, and some on Snell have been developed. So, and that's naturally, that's what happens in those areas. You've got no public sector or no public infrastructure investment to make that happen. It's a single lot accessing a road. As the city looked at this area in order to develop and capitalize on the property on the interior of the block, now you're gonna need to invest in roads, potentially water service, potentially sewer service, and things of that nature. So when you're starting to look at things like that, the numbers really start to become difficult to make sense of new single family homes on larger lots. When you consider the cost of infrastructure. So what we're seeing around the country and around upstate New York is, again, denser, more diverse housing complexes with smaller single family homes and potentially attached housing in settings like this. Next slide, Molly. And when bringing it back to Geneva, so what opportunities does that create for the city? Well, that type of more mixed housing of various densities creates a potential for an increase to the local tax base while simultaneously responding to the changing housing market trends. And it's as Molly put on the slide here, this can be a balanced approach. It's not all one way or all the other way. You can have a little bit of both and have success in terms of economic, housing choice, etc. And when you look at the city's current comprehensive plan, we think it's a sound document. There's some sound reasoning in it. Some of the highlights here, there may be demand for residential development that is smaller than and more denser than what's currently allowed by current code. The 3 acre minimum lot size for non-residential uses and the half-acre lot size for residential uses may not be the perfect and best fit given the market and given the direction that the city is interested in thinking about and interested in considering. You know, we thought coming in the agricultural residential district is almost a misnomer because someone had said one of the comments that there may be some limited agricultural activity still going on. That was not our understanding. We do not think that's the case. We've been told we have not been told that until recently based on that email. So we don't feel agricultural activities are a major use that will continue in that area. It doesn't mean there's not some small stuff going on right now. We're not dismissing that at all. But in long term, it doesn't seem like this area is primed for continued agricultural use over time. With that, I'll turn over to Molly for some other considerations and a little deeper dive in what we've been thinking about and doing.
Thanks. So like John said, you know, this is sort of one of the alternatives given a lot of the stuff that we've heard so far and a lot of the factors that John just went through. And we wholly understand your concerns and have a lot of experience, obviously, with zoning that ranges across the board in terms of how it structures and regulates or permits various types of development. So one of the number one things we heard and a big piece of our conversation in our last work session with council was acknowledging the difference in character here between where the two main areas where the mixed residential district is proposed. So clearly the Middle Street area, there's a lot smaller lot sizes there. The land area potential is clearly much smaller, a lot less acreage to work with. It's a little bit more like infill development than wholly new proposed neighborhoods, so to speak. Whereas obviously, I mean, you can clearly just see from the parcel map, and a lot of you have given us, you know, your feedback and observations on this. There's just a lot more to consider. So we hear you on that point, and that was something we discussed with council and came out of it and said that maybe the current approach for mixed residential as it's laid out and structured right now isn't appropriate in whole for this area. So we wanted to get out in front of a few things tonight to clarify with you some of the considerations and modifications that we are planning on working through with council. So one of those is sort of splitting the minutia, I should say, of the mixed residential district. So how it applies to the Middle Street area, we likely feel that it will stay as proposed. There might be minor changes as we work through some of these things with council, but for the most part, the feedback has been that as it's structured right now, it suits this area along Middle Street. We are looking at creating an alternate approach for SLOSSON Road, Snell Road, LOCHLAND Road area here. We will differentiate this in a way that considers a larger minimum lot size in some cases, in some respects, a larger setback requirement. We heard that too. Clearly smaller or larger lots create a lot different opportunities for how you situate properties and structures on the lot. We also believe, since there's a lot of space here, there's a necessity or potential for a buffer area between the existing developments that are there now. So largely the homes along SLOSSON there with that buffer area. And then the other consideration of what you do with multifamily at that greater density level. So anything over 6 units. We've discussed with council the potential for making that special permit. Right now it's a special permit for anything over 12 units. So, you know, we may be having that conversation as to whether or not that also becomes a special permit for anything over 6. But these are sort of the main alternatives that we have been looking at with council and that we will be working through. So that being said, the mixed residential district at its whole, and I wanted to pull this out because I know it's kind of buried in the text there, and we see it as our job moving forward to make this more explicit in the code. But the purpose, whether it's the mixed residential applied to Middle Street or the mixed residential in whatever form, one or two, one of the main pieces and tenets is making sure that there is a natural transition from what exists today in terms of that single or two family, low density development pattern, and what potential there is for higher density as you kind of move away from that your existing neighborhood. And we also want to make sure we're fostering the compatibility of residences. Heard a lot too about scale. Maybe there's concerns about building heights and other things. So built into this district is anything that may be proposed in terms of investment down the line. It has to meet these standards, and we're looking to try to make sure we're being very clear in how this applies. That being said, the MR2 district. So again, these are things that we are proposing to work through with council. So some changes to consider: a minimum 150-foot buffer. So this is this image here is just a mock-up. This is, by no way a site plan or anything like that, but showing, what that 150-foot buffer looks like. Obviously, many of you know there's some trees and other natural buffer that exists there now, for example. And then putting and replicating that minimum 20,000 square foot lot size. We did an assessment of these properties that front SLOSSON, and the majority, there's a handful that are slightly under 20,000. There's a few more that are under 30,000, and basically all of them are at or under 1 acre. So copying that over and acknowledging what John said at the beginning, you're not likely to see a minimum of 1 acre in new residential development, single family residential development. But we can, and this is literally a copy and paste of the existing frontage to the other side here against the green buffer. And this is exactly what this district is intended to require, matching like with like where you are adjacent here. Making sure that so that minimum lot size applies here where you are adjacent to and in close proximity, the existing neighborhood. Addressing a maximum building height that again reflects that of what is already happening along SLOSSON. So, here maintaining that, and then potentially or keeping your single and two family. Maybe there's some two family opportunities in here, but essentially that low density, that single and two, not multifamily, at the western side of the site, and allowing for that moderate density increase or mixed density to happen as you move to the east. So again, there's a lot of things to be considered in terms of grading and, how you kind of work with the landscape and things like that. So again, zoning isn't intended to make this the site plan, but the idea is we're moving from your current neighborhood environment, but still allowing for an offsetting, like John said, some of those costs that come with building this new infrastructure in this area by providing a little that, moderate increase in density as you move closer towards LOCHLAND Road here. So in this area, depending, it could be a mix of continued single family, two family, as well as some multifamily, like we said, up to 6 units by right, and maybe in certain circumstances, it might make sense if there's some that are slightly over that density at this easternmost edge. What that means too, and we want to be very clear in terms of impact, not just to the proximity on the land and how it may be located, but also how that impacts view sheds and accounts for topography. So this section here where you have MR, so that's that brown area here. This is the existing, essentially existing single family profile, that front SLOSSON, accounting for that 150 plus buffer. This is an estimate. So, but taking that 150 plus buffer, having that 2-story max height, you can see that at this point, this house would be almost a complete completely under the grade of the existing development. And again, this would be single family, matching the character of what's there potentially. That is what the code would permit and require. Moving away from that towards Lochland Road, you have the potential now to go up to 3 stories, to have some mix of multifamily units in this case. And again, that section is wholly under the grade of the existing neighborhood up at SLOSSON. So we think that this is a good representation. You can see obviously with the trees and things that are there now, this is kind of an opportunity to have that infill, but it's not like, you know, it's not a flat grade, essentially is what we're looking at. Pretty significant change in grade. So these are the clarifications we just wanted to get out in front of, because a lot of this relates to the comments that we've heard, and council has been receptive in our conversations with them have been, how can we adapt and how can we balance the need and desire to maintain the character in and around your neighborhood while offsetting that with the opportunity for future mixed density, alternative housing types, things like that at the easternmost edge. So that's all we have to cover, and we're here to listen. As John said in the beginning, this is important to us. We appreciate you taking the time, whether it's here tonight or the messages and emails you've sent to Katie. Those also get, sent to us so we can hear them as well. But now I'll stop talking and we'll move forward with the comments.
All right, just real quick, Molly, for anyone who kind of really hasn't been following the zoning process or they're not zoning pros, when you talk about the potential for a 6 unit by special permit, what would a special permit be for those who may be listening, who this is kind of their first time interacting with our zoning update?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So the purpose of a special permit. So there are things, and they exist within the city, and you can see them elsewhere in newer developments. There's 3, 4 family, 5 family units that are built that on the outside, aside from the fact that you might see 2 or 3 doors, look much like a single family home. Again, this isn't something by code that would be permitted in that area behind the homes fronting SLOSSON. It would be further away, but that type of development would be permitted. But you would still have to have your site plan review. So that's, planning board and staff and everyone else taking a look at physically what that looks like. A special permit, so for anything and higher than that, increased density, is a second look at saying, all right, this density has a potential to have a greater, significant impact, whether it's because of traffic or demands on utilities, or maybe it's, again, it's harder if it's a 12 unit building to look like a single family structure. So, there's clearly differences at that level of density, and the special use permit process is the opportunity to look at that and say, all right, where this is proposed at Lochland Road or, in that section, either it makes sense based on, these assessments and looking at impact to traffic, et cetera, or maybe it doesn't. Maybe putting 4 12 unit structures in a row, taking a look at the impacts in traffic or something like that, warrants that double check with the special use permit. So that's just another step in ensuring compatibility and checking that level of impact on the community, because the site plan review process isn't always the place where you can nuance like that. So the special use permit is the opportunity for the city to look at the nuances in terms of that level of density. But I just want to be clear again that this code isn't predicting what comes down the line. It's just allowing or negotiating with how you balance where we see the housing market now versus and balancing that with what you have. It's probably long-winded, I'm sorry.
I see that John Pruitt has his hand raised, and so John, do you want to ask your question, then we can go into, I'll read the email statements that I've gotten.
Sure, that'd be fine. I was curious relative to the 6th Ward along Middle Street, and in terms of the type of housing that could be built there, what would you guesstimate, if you will, would be the value or the cost of those homes to buy? Are they $150,000 types of buildings or homes, or are they more or less?
So that's actually something that zoning cannot dictate. So zoning is not a measure to be able to, implement that in any way. It's based on what the demand is. So like John said, there's an increased cost in that development, and it would be up to that investor or that developer to say, this is the price point where I can, where it makes economic and fiscal sense to me. But that's not something that zoning can dictate. And like I said, we can't predict that at this point.
So there's nothing in zoning that would prevent a $75,000 or $1 million home from being built there. Is that correct?
Correct.
Correct. You got it. And you asked about Middle Street, right, John?
That's correct.
Yeah, so it's and I'm not the best one to speak to this. I'm not an architect or a builder, but we're around them quite a bit. It's new construction right now, unassisted. I mean, I've got colleagues in the business that say, it's hard to do new construction for less than $100 a square foot or $130 a square foot. I've got other developers that say I can't touch it for anything less than $150 a square foot. So it depends on, the type of developer. It depends on, is it, there's a lot of government assisted, and I'm not saying government assisted in terms of rents or anything like that, but there's a lot of programs out there right now that will create market-driven, market rate housing for entry-level housing through home ownership programs and things like that. So for an infill area like Middle Street, you could easily put $1 million homes along Middle Street. There's nothing stopping you, but the lower threshold is a little more challenging just because construction costs are fixed.
Yes, I'd seen an artist rendition of some of the townhouses, which sort of made me wonder, and questions came up from people in the ward, whether those would be affordable homes for people that live around here. So I understand the answer, though. In terms of the homes that could be built there, it seems to me like there's quite a bit of property on I guess it would be the south or this behind Middle Street, if you will. Because I know there's a couple of homes that are built there now, and there's a really long backyard. Does that provide for an opportunity for other building, facing the lake? Could someone put high-rise townhouses right along the, on the inside of the railroad tracks facing the lake? Is that something that would be allowed by virtue of the zoning that's being proposed?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And, I'm glad that that came up. The infill opportunity is exactly that, to essentially, in those areas, because the lots are smaller, you kind of have to maximize what you're getting in terms of that new development. So, and that's a prime area, and that's exactly what this sort of district is intended to do there. And there's a lot more flexibility, also allowing for, there's a handful of parcels there, and this is really throughout the city, but that has no bearing on mixed residential. There's a handful of parcels there that could have, a home or two on one of, a lot that on the closer to the northern side there to fill in. But yes, that is the main opportunity for the mixed, which again, when you have a home, that's development that's 4 or 5 units, it can be closer to market rate housing instead of super that $1 million home. It doesn't preclude that, but it does make it a little bit easier to serve that middle income base or young professionals looking for that, low maintenance environment. empty nesters, again, looking for, I don't want to take care of that yard anymore, or things like that. So it's still a relatively affordable environment, but also maximizing your development potential.
Molly, on Middle Street, the maximum height is what, 35 feet, I think?
No, not for the multifamily. So it is 3 stories there.
And well, that's something I'd like to question. I know it's been brought up a number of times that high rises, perhaps 6 stories, could, condos could be put in a row right down through there facing the lake. And according to this, no dice, eh?
Nope.
Why is that? Just because that's the way we're forming it, or because the land wouldn't tolerate it or something?
So
it's the way we're forming. It's the way we're forming it for neighborhood character. But if you wanted, I mean, don't get me wrong. We've had conversations with the architect on our team and some other places. I mean, I think if you just went all in on what the market would be happiest with, would be taller there. You know what I mean?
But you also have to balance that with the site constraints. So knowing and what we've talked through with Neil and staff, there are challenges there. And if you go higher, that's a higher number of units, and what you still have to figure out how you manage parking and things like that. And so it's difficult on that site to really get that scale of development, because somehow you still have to accommodate for parking and some of the other amenities for that area. So it is difficult, but I think that it is very much an opportunity, and we've heard an opportunity for that taller, denser development.
I think it's the most desirable possibility for development of high value condos that have in Geneva that I know of. The Lakeview would really be quite valuable there. So it'd be nice not to restrict it. And then the other thing I had from the map that I saw when you first started that John was showing, it looked like we're starting or stopping right about at Galvin Park, and it doesn't extend in terms of potential for residences going further east. Is that correct?
Let me pull that up again.
And that's my last question, by the way.
Good questions.
I'm just going to pull it up so I understand what you're asking. Okay, so
Where the brown stops is right next to the park, I believe.
yeah, that's
correct.
Galvin Park. Yep.
Oh, that's Galvin. I thought further to the right was Galvin. I'm sorry.
Yep, that's Galvin Park there.
And is that Evans Street? I see. So it stops at Evans Street, the brown shading, if you will.
Correct.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that's the cemetery there, John.
Okay, thank you. I was looking at the wrong green. Thank you. That answers my questions.
No problem.
I do want to stress, though, I think it'd be nice to be able to keep the lakefront development open for higher value condos. That would actually improve the value of the homes that are existing on Middle Street as well, I should think. And quite a few people have talked about making that cobblestone area next to the old train station into sort of like a Pittsford Landing type of place and extending back beyond there. That would be desirable if somebody had enough wealth to be able to do that type of development. So it'd be nice to be able to keep that open if possible. Thank you, folks.
No problem.
Great. So I'm going to get into reading some of the statements that people wanted me to read. And again, for anyone who's just joining us, we're talking about mixed residential as a whole that's in the city. And so that is in Ward 1 and then Ward 6, which John was just talking about on Middle Street. So I know a lot of people who are interested in talking tonight are specifically interested in talking kind of about the one that's down in Ward 1. But if anyone wants to put it on the live chat or send me emails, we are still talking about the mixed residential that's in Ward 6 as well. All right, so I am going to read a statement from Craig Parsons, and I'm going to apologize right off the bat if I butcher anyone's last name. I'm French, so I'm still getting used to these Italian names that are in Geneva. So sorry in advance. Okay, so Craig goes, as a resident of Slosson Lane, myself and my wife, Nancy Coluzzi, would like to go on record opposing any changes to the zoning in our neighborhood. We bought and reside here because we enjoy and prefer the country setting we have. Zoning changes that would allow denser building by reducing lot size requirements could drastically alter our neighborhood. We believe the zoning here in our surrounding area should be left as is with minimum lot sizes at no less than 10,000 square feet. And Molly and John, feel free to respond if to any statement that I read, if there's anything that you'd like to clarify or kind of correct or anything like that. The next statement I have is from Mike and Terry Blanzar. My wife and I would like to pass on our concerns about the zoning change to multi-use in the Slosson Lane neighborhood. I've lived on Slosson Lane for almost my whole life, 60 years. The city of Geneva has always required any new construction in the area to maintain the character of the neighborhood. This character is an average 20,000 square foot lot with a single family home and agriculture that, despite the consultants alleging otherwise, is in current use and has been for over 100 years. With the rezoning, this character will be thrown out the window. The BNL consultants attest that a low density lot is 2,500 square feet. At 43,560 square feet per acre, 38 acres equals 1,655,280 square feet. Dividing this by the 2,500 size lot and then subtracting 20% for infrastructure. Yes, this percentage is arbitrary. This leaves 529 homes. To me, this sounds like an awful lot of homes for a quote unquote low density neighborhood. Even doubling the lot size to 5,000 results in 264, still a large number of homes for 38 acres. Also, to continue with the math, using the average modern double wides dimensions, 26 by 56, as the footprint for a ranch house on 2,500 square foot lot, our math shows that the resulting setback yard on all sides of the home would only be approximately 5.5 feet. Just for comparison, that is 3 feet shorter than the height of the average man, 5'9". It appears this low, quote unquote, low density development would resemble more of a mobile home park than anything else. And that is definitely not keeping with the character of the neighborhood.
Katie, one thing I'll just chime in. One of the things with the smaller lot size figures in the code, when you look at multifamily projects, townhouses, for example, or row houses like brownstones where they're owner occupied, it's zoning is not perfect. It's kind of, sometimes it can be relatively crude. Those numbers are how you regulate multifamily projects. So, and we can clarify that in the next version of this. In terms of, would you build a single family home on a 2,500 square foot lot? No, but if I had 4 or 5 row houses all attached on a 10,000, if I had 4 row houses on a 10,000 square foot lot, there's your 2,500. So when you're starting to talk about how do we regulate lot size when it comes to multifamily units, whether it's owner occupied or renter occupied, whether it's apartments, whether it's townhouses, row houses, brownstones, whatever term you put on it, that's how you do it. So we apologize because that's just the limitations in our craft, and we will try to be clearer next time. But those lot sizes are unrealistic for a single family home. They're meant to say, look, if you're going to do multifamily projects, this is how you do it. If you're going to do a single family home, they're minimums, so that if you wanted to do a single family home on a half-acre lot, you absolutely can. But to expect that someone's going to put a single family home on 2,500 square feet, especially an interior lot with roads and everything like that, that was not the intention, and that's not what the intention of the code or the district was meant to do.
And I'd just like to add to that, again, like I said before, this isn't a straight application of that minimum lot size requirement. That requirement and purpose of the district to be a transition from your existing neighborhood pattern to something that's potentially of a higher density means that you're not just taking the acreage of the area and dividing it evenly by that minimum lot size. It is modified, and it is then essentially reduced by that higher minimum lot size requirement at the western side to a potentially lower lot size at the other side. But to John's point, we can definitely work on making that more clear between detached and attached and how that applies to single versus multi.
Mm-hmm.
Leslie, if your question is in relation to kind of what Molly and John just said, feel free to go ahead and ask if you need clarification for anything that they just mentioned.
Sure. I guess I just wanted to know a little bit more about, I think the idea of the zoning, what you said in the beginning was that it was important to have like a range of different kinds of houses. But then when you did the rezoning, there is no half acre lot size zone. Everything went to like the least dense went to this 2,500 square feet, even places like ours that already have, these half acre lot sizes. And so to me, there isn't this mix now. Everything is highish density. And I don't quite understand that, what you did there and why that was, because to me, it doesn't look mixed at all. It looks all high density.
Leslie, it's a good question. I mean, the challenge becomes zoning is really useful. I mean, but it has limitations, and you're seeing a few of them in this conversation, which is zoning geeks. We enjoy the conversation, but we can't micromanage. We can't do a site plan essentially for that district. So, for example, there's some very large parcels in that district that we, in our mind's eye, as Molly explains very well, is we could see it going from denser near the west, and then or less dense on the west to more dense on the east. But it's really bad practice to essentially put 3 or 4 different zoning districts on one of those big parcels, because it's realistic that on one of those big parcels, you're probably going to have a range of residential densities. So the district has to essentially accommodate that without micromanaging each parcel.
But I mean, I think the question I really had was, our actual street got completely changed into this high density, thing as well. I mean, I'm not even thinking about like everything in the city got changed to this high density, zoning categories. And that's the thing I didn't understand.
Yeah, I understand your question. So across the board, so leaving the SLOSSON Lane, handful of those half acre lots that are there, looking at the entirety of your code as it exists today, somewhere in the range, I can't remember the exact number, but it's well over 60-70% of your lots are considered non-conforming by your current code's minimum lot size and minimum lot width standards. Meaning, in the unfortunate event of someone's house being destroyed, catching fire, something like that, maybe there's a small addition or something that they'd like to put on, that requires and puts the onus on the property owner to now go through the Zoning Board of Appeals and obtain a variance, which by New York state law is intended to be very difficult to obtain. So that becomes that extra step and that extra burden on the property owner. So what we did is we adjusted across the board the minimum lot size requirement to reflect what's happening. The reason why that minimum lot size then also extended to SLOSSON Lane and where you have 20,000 square foot lots is because it's still consistent with as single family homes in terms of density by way of just looking at units, not land area. It's still single family homes, and that's just a minimum. So your lots exist at 20,000 square feet or above. And that means that yours continue to conform. So nothing changed. It's just that number across the board went to reflect what's happening elsewhere. So we reduce the non-conformity.
I think it feels like a massive, drastic change to our zoning because I don't really necessarily trust the developers. All they have to do is meet the minimum requirements to the zoning. And so it completely changes like what can be built right next door. And I think that this idea that everything just got turned into high density housing all across the city, I think that really confuses me. And it's inconsistent with the things that you said, that you wanted a mixed kinds of housing so different people that wanted different things could have them. And right now it doesn't feel like that's possible. Do you know what I mean? In your current plan, even with the adjustments that you're trying to make to this other kind of the MR2 zone, like it doesn't seem consistent with the goals that you're trying to put forward. Do you know what I mean? Which is
sure.
A range of different kind of housing types and lot sizes and zoning types.
Sure, it does. Though, by preserving, so the way the MR2 is structured is that you cannot put a multifamily small lot development directly adjacent to the homes on SLOSSON Lane. That's the way the MR2 is structured. You cannot do it with the modifications that we talked about. You also are required to have that buffer by the modifications that we're proposing to council. The mix, the more permissive and sort of adjusted housing comes as you move away from the existing. So that's where you can have, maybe it's a 4-unit, maybe it's a small apartment building. That's where that variation, attached homes, that's where that variation and mix comes in. So that doesn't apply right now. SLOSSON Lane also is only zoned as that low density residential, which also doesn't permit multifamily. So you are stayed and zoned as single family, and you are insulated by the requirements of MR from having a drastic change in density against your neighborhood. It cannot happen.
But I mean, I think I'm just thinking about these. I'll ask one more question right here because I still don't quite understand. I mean, did you just say that the low density zoning category that you created doesn't permit multifamily?
Correct. Yeah.
Well, then I don't understand that. But John said the low density section was designed, each lot was 2,500 square feet, right? Like that was the category. That's the minimum lot size. And it was completely designed for multifamily. I mean, I think multifamily.
We're separating. We're separating.
The confusion is at the nomenclature. I wasn't talking about low density. I was talking about mixed.
Yes.
So the mixed density, which is the brown on the right, is not what the homes along SLOSSON are zoned. So this homes along SLOSSON are low density residential.
Single family.
Single family.
What is the lot size for those?
So that lot size was adjusted, like I said before, to look at let me pull this over, to look at, like I said before, there was 60 over 7 to 70% of these lots are non-conforming under your current zoning classification. So we adjusted the minimum to reflect what's there. That minimum continues to keep your lots at their current size as conforming. So that minimum doesn't change your lot. Your lot can stay.
What is say again, what the minimum for the yellow, light yellow?
Tannish, whatever color it is, Leslie, yeah.
Yeah, that's, hold on,
It's 4,000.
Correct.
And just to add something in, and I'll kind of put on my small city planner hat, but Molly and John, correct me if I'm totally off base. One of the goals of a zoning code update is to streamline our zoning code. So we don't want to have 18,000 different districts to fit kind of one every street, because then if someone's looking at it, it's really confusing. So the goal is to streamline our zones and try to combine the zones that work. Obviously, as you can kind of see from what we've been talking about, based off of feedback, we realized that the MR district on Middle and the MR district on SLOSSON are different. And so we split them off. But with the single family, low density residential, it wouldn't make sense for us to kind of break off all the residential houses that are on SLOSSON, just because they are naturally different from most of the other houses in Geneva that are single family, low density. But as Molly and John are saying, the majority of the properties that are in the city were non-conforming. So by taking the low density single family zone and just lowering the lot size requirement for all of us, that means we can still keep everybody in that single district, but it's helping the people, as you can see on the screen, all the red are the non-conforming who were previously non-conforming, if that makes sense.
So this is the parcels under your existing zoning that are non-conforming. So as built and as existing right now, the code says they cannot and should not exist. And that also includes some sections of previously approved subdivisions where there are some lots over here that have not yet been developed. And because they're non-conforming, that precludes anyone from coming in and being able to purchase that property and build a home on it without having to get several variances to make that happen. So under the proposed code, we adjusted that to meet the, I guess, the most common environment. And so, you know, we weren't going to zone for these very, very small anomalies, but you can tell that, you know, whether it's under your existing or under the proposed, all of these homes here remain conforming.
I don't want to hog all the time, but let me just ask, like, the South Lake neighborhood is quite different, and it would make sense to me. I understand you don't want to have a zillion zoning categories, but everything in the South Lake was conforming, right? And these tend to be larger lot sizes. It would make sense to me that we had another category that would be a little more typical for what happens in our neighborhood. And then it would be consistent with the things that you said in the beginning, where you wanted to have a variety of different kinds of housing opportunities for people. And there are still people that want kind of a more like a more rural setting that still live in Geneva. And I think it would make sense to me that you had that category.
So your concern, and just so I understand, is your concern is that you just want to see a minimum lot size change for these properties?
No, I thought this whole South Lake neighborhood would be more like our agricultural residential and like zoning category that,
Right.
And I understand the reasons why you want it to be more higher density housing, but I mean, I understand what you're saying. And I think but from my point of view, that the arguments that you're making, that I'm changing the zoning so that every house has this really low density, this small lot size threshold that they have to meet because you're not conforming, that doesn't really apply based on the map you just showed us to the South Lake neighborhood. Do you know what I mean? And
Right.
That applies mostly to every other part of Geneva. So it makes sense to me that you would create zoning categories for those whole neighborhoods so that they were conforming. But it also makes sense that the South Lake has a different character than some of the other parts of Geneva, and that maybe it would be wise to keep that character the same because it would allow variety in the housing stock in Geneva.
Right. And that's not to beat a dead horse, and that's why the MR requires this section here to have the exact same character as you have right here. Single family, minimum 20,000 square feet. The variety comes in at this end, essentially in this parcel, over here. This is the same character, unless you're, the other question is, unless you're saying that you just don't want to see development whatsoever in all of this section.
Folks, can we just kind of table that? Because I know, Leslie, you have some time later too that you will be speaking. And so I don't have too many more emailed in comments, and they're pretty quick. So if we can just get through those, and then we can let the kind of go into the format of going through everyone who signed up to speak, we can do that if everyone's all right with that.
Katie, can I just say one thing? The diagram that I sent you really has very much to do with just the issue that Leslie was raising. And would this not be an appropriate time to look at that and consider it instead of addressing other concerns and other letters right now?
My feeling is that the rest of this meeting, primarily from everyone who's emailed me, is going to primarily be about SLOSSON. So I don't think we're ever going to pivot off of kind of this conversation, and I think the major discussion is about the houses that are kind of lining up next to it. So I think if we can just get through the red comments first, and then we can kind of open it up and allow for a little bit of the more free form. So I would please ask that if we can just get through the emailed comments first, that would be great. Thank you. Okay. So the next one.
Katie, wait, I had one comment. I'm sorry. Instead of saying SLOSSON, we should say J, SLOSSON, and Snell, which are all city properties. that also have been, we've all been reduced to these 4,000 square foot lot sizes. So I just when we're going on, many people are opposed to this type of zoning, this zoning change on J Street, on Snell Road. There's somebody on Lochland Road who's opposed. So instead of just saying SLOSSON, let's just say a larger area there, because there are other people who are affected by these changes.
I was just using shorthand. I'll try to keep that in mind when we refer to it. I wasn't sure what the clear definition was of that area, so I'll try to remember that. The next comment is from Jessica Farrell. She goes, I wanted to email regarding the zoning of SLOSSON Lane to express my support for the zoning changes proposed by the zoning consultants to make it mixed residential. I know that residents have expressed their concerns about traffic if the new zoning changes are implemented, and I sympathize. But I think that these new zoning changes are in the best interest of the broader community of Geneva. The City Council has spoken a lot about the need to bring development to Geneva, and I think these new zoning policies will be one of the best measures the city can take to encourage positive development, which will respond to our city's housing crisis. Again, I support the zoning changes as originally recommended by the city's zoning consultants because I believe that mixed residential zoning will be good for Ward 6 and Geneva as a whole. Thank you for all the work, City of Geneva, and our community. Next up is Kieran Maker. I'm putting in a formal comment regarding SLOSSON Lane. I am in support of the proposed zoning changes and look forward to seeing that street become mixed residential and Ward 6 gain some apartments and other housing. I think the city can figure out any issues with traffic and the city has my full support. Next up, we have Penny Hankins. She goes, I support the proposed zoning changes for SLOSSON Lane in Geneva, New York. I live in Ward 6 for over 6 years, and I know that mixed residential is good for Ward 6. Apartment buildings should be allowed in that area. The next one is from Heather May. She goes, I apologize for the brevity of my comments, though perhaps that's a welcome change from my typical verbosity. I'm hoping that you can pass along to council that I support the zoning changes that are being proposed to SLOSSON Road. While I absolutely sympathize with homeowners who are protective of what exists in their neighborhood, I think we must prioritize the ability for Genevans to access affordable housing and services as well as Geneva's budget. Both will benefit from the zoning change. All right. The next is from Kelly Hart. She wanted me to simply note her objection for tonight's meeting on the basis that the proposed changes would allow development that endangers our community because of likely increased traffic, would cause environmental damage and alter the character of our neighborhood. And now I am going to go through with, that's everyone that I've received by email. I haven't gotten anything off of the live chat. So now I'm going to go through with people who signed up, and I'm just going to go based off of the emails that I have on my list. So I think everybody should be able to unmute themselves if they're going. If anyone's having issues, just let me know and we can move you down to the bottom of the list. The first one that I have is Joan, if you want to go.
Hello. I'm Joan, this is Tom. I had a question when you had the graphic up and the other lots that are facing Snell Road and Lochland, they're all covered in the brown area that would be mixed use. Those houses are similar to the ones on SLOSSON where they have a large lot size. Are you not going to include them in a low density, like around the corner to Snell and around the corner to Lochland? You know what I'm talking about, the graphic that you just had up before?
Yeah. So those homes, we fully recognize that they are of a similar density in terms of the lot size and being single family homes there. The MR district, as it's applied to there, like I said before, still wholly protects those properties to match that lot size development and like unit density, so single family, and have that buffer. So that's the same. I know we focus, and I apologize, we were hyper-focused on the SLOSSON lane section, but the same protections exist. So even though you're in the MR district, the purpose of the MR district is to recognize that that's the character there, and we want to match that and move away from it in terms of permitting any change in character or density.
I'm just wondering why you didn't just include them in the low density, like make them all light yellow as well.
That was something that was brought up with council, and that is, I should have clarified, that is something that has been considered.
I guess our concern was, again, like in keeping in character with the neighborhood, to have wider lot sizes and setbacks. I understand what you're saying about how where the grade goes down, the further away you get from where we live on SLOSSON, then you increase the multifamily, etc. But I think it's not that big of a drop in grade. Like somebody had said, oh, you know, if you look out from where we are, you'll just see the tops of a 3.5-story building. I don't think that's true. Right into somebody's apartment, really. It's not, I don't know if you've been out here, but it's really not, we're not up on a ridge, in other words. We're not looking down. It's a really gradual grade. So the other thing would be about the roads and the access. I don't know who, I know you're just working on the zoning, but the access from SLOSSON Lane would bisect properties that are now low density. And I'm not even sure if that's amenable, like if it's even wide enough. And I'm talking about the, it's like a right of way that goes in between Ziza's property and then another empty lot, which was going to be a house, but I don't know if that's going to happen anymore. Is there not, does that have to be a road, or could a road be just a cemetery?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that would be something, so the zoning isn't the place where you would determine access points, because like Jen said, it's the imperfect tool in which we're trying to find the common ground across what's existing and what is potential, right? So your site plan and subdivision process is what would look at that. And an implication of that would be to say, where are we driving that new traffic? So it, you know, begs the question, and has the way we also were recently charged with taking a look at the admin and review procedures, which includes site plan review. And those are shortly to be released for you to look at as well. And that includes very specific considerations in exactly what you're saying. Where is the access way? How does it impact existing developments, and how does it manage traffic demands? And my guess would be there would definitely need to be consideration for the access, particularly because the density is permitted or allowable on the eastern side, that your access would be Route 14. You know, it really wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to completely divert higher traffic away to SLOSSON. It's more likely to happen at Route 14, but that is something that through the site plan review and subdivision process would be thoroughly investigated, and it's well within the city's power. And you'll see in the new structure of that section what's required of an applicant to prove those things, and what's required from an engineering and a traffic study standpoint to assess that.
Would be in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever we could do.
Yep.
Okay, we just have concerns, you know, I think you've addressed a lot of them as far as making sure that we have a buffer zone and single family units, and then going out to other types closer to 14. And hopefully then once you rewrite the proposal, then we have another chance to chime in.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. So our plan at this point is we obviously are taking the feedback, and we know it's difficult because we had this conversation with council and we have these additional modifications to consider. But after our next discussion with council, we hope to have those answers. And there will be another public version that will go out that you can take a look at based on this MR1 versus MR2 context.
And when you call it like the MR, is that inclusive of, like, would you have like daycare centers or nursing homes, or is it just strictly residential?
Right now it is just strictly residential, and there's been no discussion on bringing in anything new there. There's a daycare center option from a special permit standpoint, and there again an office or administrative or professional office, wouldn't be like a medical office or clinic, by special permit in MR2. But again, because the residential exists at the western side, all of that is focused on the eastern side. So, and the special permit process, like I said before, if it's something, that's a large office that's going to have a huge parking demand or something like that, the special permit process is the way that you look at that and say, that's not appropriate. So it gives you the opportunity to identify where it might work and where it wouldn't. But that is, again, the way that the MR is structured, is to not have any of that on the western side.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Joan. Peg, are you all set? You want to go next?
Hi, I'm Peg Bonder. I live at 121 SLOSSON Lane. I went around to most of the houses on the J, SLOSSON, Snell areas that are attached to the proposed zoning, asking people to sign a petition against the rezoning of SLOSSON Lane area. I have 58 signatures here from people, all living in the city, all affected by this. And all but one house that I knocked on and got through a person was against the zoning changes. I also went through and have done some research to find out the lot size, and you kind of touched upon this earlier, but I went to Ontario County website and it's called oncord.co.ontario.ny.us. 16 properties have less than a half an acre, and that number was 0.46 acres, okay, which is close to a half an acre. There are 6 properties in that area that are over an acre, and 46 properties are between a half and 1 full acre. In my opinion, what's being proposed is unacceptable. Whatever development being proposed should be in line with the present housing density as it exists, no more than 1 house per half acre. The land should remain agricultural residential. Once you go and, like what you've talked about, going through and putting all these little things in there and having it one group zoning change, what's to prevent a year from now someone coming in and filling that entire property, since it's zoned that way, in apartments? There's no guarantee whatsoever. But if you could keep it the way it is right now at a half an acre per house, I would be fine with that, and allow people to be able to still continue to farm that land. I've lived here for 32 years, and there's 2 parcels of land that has been farmed in either corn or soybean every single year. And I think what you're proposing is absolutely unacceptable, and it will ruin my property value. I bought here for a particular reason. I like the agricultural feel to the property. And if you fill that property full of apartments or townhouses, my property value is going to drop. And you know darn well that my taxes are not going to drop. Thank you very much for your time.
All right. John, Molly, do you have any comments about that?
Sure. Yeah, I wasn't sure if you wanted me to add anything to that. So the one thing, and I just want to, I guess, clarify, is it sounds like your in your opinion, your preference is to not see any development occur in here. However, if I misinterpreted that, I just want to clarify again that no apartments could occur at this section. No high density anything. This is single family here. Okay. Anything that would be higher density, and the only thing permitted by right would be up to 6 units in a building. So again, that's not an apartment high rise. There's a max of 3 stories. There's a max of 6 units in one structure. And if there were to be a proposal of something that had more units in a single structure, that would be through the additional review process of special permit, and that would be limited to the eastern side. That under the MR district, that cannot happen over here.
Okay, next up is Dan
Can I just say
McGowan.
one thing? Actually, she didn't say she wanted no development. She
Was
said,
asking for clarification Molly was asking for clarification if Peg said that she wanted no development. She didn't claim, she was just asking for that.
Yeah.
that was not what she said. It was
I
not my
feel that if we had, one house per half acre, that would be absolutely fine with
One
me.
house, one family.
One house, one family for a half an acre. Keep it the same type of density as to what we have right now on Slosson and Jay and Snell and Lochland.
Okay, thank you. That was just the clarification that Molly was asking for. Look, it's important to know we're all on the same side. We're all trying to work together to figure this out.
It does not feel like we're on the same side. I feel like I am fighting. I feel as though I am fighting to keep my neighborhood the way my neighborhood is. If we were to have something like Lincoln Way, that would be perfectly fine with me. But when you start with 6 families per house is unacceptable in my opinion. It's going to change my property value. You can't tell me it's not going to affect my property value. Thank you.
And that is the importance of going through these discussions and having our draft versions that have been sent out so we can get feedback and so council's aware of community input. Because as I said at the beginning of this meeting, ultimately the decision goes to council as to what is going to happen with this parcel. Okay, as I mentioned, next up was Dan McGowan. He was on earlier, but I don't see him. So Dan, if you're watching, just shoot me an email and let me know if you want to come back at the end of it. All right. I have Ellen up next, but I just see Michael. Do you want to go next, Michael, or do you have Ellen that's nearby that you can grab her? She's next up.
Oh, you need to, yeah, we can't hear you. Can you unmute?
Okay, I just wanted to thank Tom Burrow, our council member, and all the other people in the city who made this meeting possible, because we've been wanting to speak to the consultants for a long time and give our input. I'm Mary Bogan, 221 Slosson Lane. I'm speaking for 55 homeowners who live in the city of Geneva. And we all live within 100 feet of the parcel to be rezoned.
Yes, we do.
Everyone is asking the city of Geneva, the city council, to keep the current zone of AR. Or if you want to rename it, still keep the specifications of 20,000 square foot lot, the same setback, the same side setbacks. No more than 2 stories. And that's what the petition said. And now about a dozen of the people who signed the petition are having their land rezoned to multi-use residential. And these are people on Snell Road and the Waylands at the end of Slosson Lane. So their own lots are being reduced from 20,000 square feet to the 2,500 minimum. And I just didn't know whether this was an oversight on the part of the consultants, but the people at the end of the block of Slosson Lane have 24 acres, and if that land changed hands, as I understand it, it would be, it's zoned now 2,500 square feet minimum lot size. So a developer could go ahead and make many units there. So I really think that those lots on Snell Road and on Slosson, at the end of Slosson, should be changed. I don't know if you can, it's the southernmost part of your map where it's all the brown color or the olive green. Anyway, somehow that it's not just the parcels that are for sale that have been turned into mixed use residential, but it's also homeowners whose lots have been turned into mixed use residential. Also that I was going to just say that you talk about having the dense zoning, the denser zoning and the denser housing farther to the east, away from the Slosson Lane homeowners and J Street homeowners. Well, I was just looking at a map today, and I think that what you're proposing is there's a woods there now that's owned by LOCHLAND School. That would be dense housing and maybe high rise housing, well, 3 stories. But I saw on the map that is a federally mapped wetland. That forest, that woods. Now I'll call the people in the county. I was a member of the county board, county planning board for 20 years, and I know that I can. They'll be able to identify whether that's a federally mapped wetland. But anyway, there's also another part that in our neighborhood here that's being rezoned is the wooded area that Hobart and William Smith just bought. And there are a lot of mature trees in there. And, that also under the zoning of mixed use residential could be turned into fraternity houses and dormitories. It could be built up in a very dense way, and the mature trees would all be cut down. And that also that's land borders on some Slosson and J Street residents who are very concerned about that. I do want to speak up for the agricultural residential zoning. I'm not opposed to development overall, but I think it should be the 20,000 square foot lots. I also think that the agricultural use of the land should be continued until until it's developed. I don't know what you call major farming, or minor farming, but it has been going on for at least 60 years. It's cultivated and grown into crops from May until November. And, agriculture is an important part of Ontario County too, and the rural character of this neighborhood. I do think that there's not much in common. There's a lot of difference between Middle Street and Slosson Lane, J Street, Snell Road, which are the only 2 parts of the city that the consultants and has proposed making mixed use residential. Now, Middle Street, the way I look at the map, is right on Route 5 and 20, a state road. The mixed use zoning in the parcel that's to the to the east of Slosson Lane, there's just Route 14, and there's some question as to whether that road can be used as an outlet to serve this development. So the outlet that is currently shown on the Coldwell Banker maps, where it shows the land for sale, is on Slosson Lane. So there's a big difference between having Slosson Lane serve a dense development and having Route 5 and 20 serve a dense development. Now the zone you propose that has been proposed to be all mixed use residential, all olive green on that map, which goes from J Street to Snell Road on the south, and all the way from LOCHLAND to Slosson. It's a diverse bit of land, because 27 acres of it are woods with mature trees. 38 acres is actively farmed. There's also the woods that I saw on the map has been mapped as a federal wetland, which is now owned by LOCHLAND School. So it's not just a big open vacant piece of land as it's sometimes described. So we would like to keep the parcel that's currently owned by Ben Carroll and Agnes Marie Carroll as agricultural residential. We would like the farming to continue, and we don't oppose development if it is within the same zone as the AR zone. The woods that's recently purchased by Hobart William Smith with all the mature trees, I don't understand why that's not zoned open space. There's very little open space in the zoning plan, 2020 zoning update plan. And Hobart William Smith has made statements about how this will be a woods with trails, recreation, environmental education. So I don't see why it's zoned multi-use residential. And I think the city should consider making it open space. And again, I just want to emphasize that the houses that people I've talked to on Snell Road, whose land has been rezoned from 20,000 square feet to 2,500 square foot zone, that doesn't seem fair to me, that the land they purchased, the house they purchased is really changed from under them. And that's all I have to say.
Sure. So appreciate that. There's a lot of good points in there. I'll first say there's actually more open space zoned in the proposed map than you have currently. So I do want to make that clear, but I hear you on the parcel with Hobart William Smith, and we can certainly reach out to them. And if that's their plan to keep it as trails and things, then can certainly make that change to open space. Not against that. As far as the wetlands and the trees, again, that's something that comes into consideration through the site plan review and subdivision review process, as well as when you take into consideration seeker. So, we all have seen, and it does happen in communities where development occurs, where there are some wetlands. That just means that you need to obviously account for that in terms of drainage and things. And development has gotten a lot more successful in how we manage that and how developers do manage that. So again, the code can't speak to that. That is something that happens when a proposal, it depends on the nature of the proposal that comes forward. So, we fully consider that, and that would be something looked at down the line, excuse me. And then I just want to make sure that it's clear that any of the higher density would not be permitted behind or to the north, immediately to the north of homes on Snell Road, immediately south to homes on J, or immediately east to homes on SLOSSON. There would be that requirement of matching existing development conditions. So that is your larger lot size. That 2,500 square foot does not apply in those areas because your homes already exist at that larger lot size. And the change to the lower lot size doesn't change your property. It exists as it is at the 20,000. It's just that minimum requirement there. But again, the MR district, I know it's a little bit confusing. It's a different tool. It's a more modern tool that we see in zoning that allows for, like we said, that flexibility of maintaining the character that you have adjacent to what's there, while offsetting the change in housing demand and the costs of potential development for that area that makes it essentially feasible.
Well, I just want to speak the Snell Road houses, though, that have had their zoning changed out from under them. Is my understanding that if someone with a 24-acre lot and now it's zoned, under your proposal, 2,500 square feet, multi-use residential. Couldn't the new owner, with that zoning, build dense housing on those lots?
It would be, like I said, it's based on proximity to what's there. So if it's, again, adjacent to what exists now as the larger lot single family, that the answer is no. I mean, the way this district is written is you cannot put a multifamily home next to a single family home. That's not the purpose of this district.
So that's in the zoning, or would that be up to the planning board to make that decision?
No, that's in the zoning. That's what the transitional provisions require. And that was, as John and I kind of said in the beginning, we know that it's sort of buried in the purpose statement, and we're going to work to try to make sure that that's more clear and upfront as part of the actual dimensional requirements in the district. But exactly that. I know it's confusing because it looks like we blanket zoned everything to potentially be multifamily, and that's not the case. There's an underlying condition that would not allow that to happen. So we'll do our best to make sure that's very clear in the MR2 version that we come up with.
The other thing that's just in terms of worth noting, we also have a maximum lot coverage in all the districts. But since we're talking about the mixed residential, the maximum lot coverage right now is in terms of gross impervious surface. So you're talking rooftops, you're talking roads, is 35%. So there's really no scenario other than a variance, which I would be hard pressed to see why that would happen. But there's really no scenario where you would develop more than a third of a lot. So you can't have apartments crammed in lot line to lot line, lot line to lot line. The code's not set up that way. 2/3 of the property have to be essentially green space. So when you're running these numbers, when you're thinking about these things, I'm not saying that's going to change your opinion on anything, but I just want you to, if you're thinking they could jam pack all these properties lot line to lot line with buildings, that's just simply not the case. I want you to at least take away that this evening. So we're essentially saying 2/3 of the property needs to be undeveloped in the district. So if someone's developing 24 acres, they can build on a third of this. They can essentially, build on a third of it, and the other 2/3 need to be in some way, shape, or form undeveloped.
So they build on 8 acres then. So
Correct.
that's a lot. That's a lot for our neighborhood to have an 8-acre house. I mean, housing development. That would be a big change.
Mm-hmm.
And as the person who owns the 24 acres at the corner, my name is Max Whelan, and abutting the property, there's several things I think that are important to raise, and Mary Bogan has very well said most of them, but I just want to reiterate. The agricultural zoning is extremely important to us because we've kept animals, we've had horses here, and in fact, that is something that we don't want to lose. Plus, there's 15 acres that we till, and that also needs to be protected. The other thing is that when we were putting in the horse fence 25 years ago, we discovered that the tile system that was put in the 19th century was disrupted by the houses that were built along Snell between my house and the Lutheran church, which is why the fields are extremely wet for probably half of the year. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have a major problem with water drainage because there are springs. I have 3 springs on my property. One is in a wishing well at the front of the property, one is in a field, and one is in the back. And they come up in the spring, and believe me, you can't walk down there until about the end of June, at least on my property. And you can till, starting about then, or the end of May, I should say. So the whole area should be kept as a green belt. And the fact that Mary has found out that it was a wetlands, I think is very fitting because that's the way it is. So I'm reluctant to change the agricultural zoning because we are dependent upon that.
Thank you.
I'll clarify too, we'll carry this through. We'll have the conversation obviously about the agricultural uses with council. And the one piece to that that we are also working on is carrying over the keeping of animals, the horses and things like that. So we certainly don't want to wholly strip that. So we need to be finding the way that we repackage that and incorporate that in what we work on.
Frank, if it's really quick, I'll
Yeah,
let
yeah,
you go.
Okay. I just want some clarity on, so what we're saying here is the house is on Slosson Lane, the house is on Snell Road. We'll just use those as an example. Their lot size, the length and width of them, let's just use from the front of the road to the back of their lot size. There would be a buffer before any development was to take place behind them. But if, let's just say 24 acres were sold, 8 acres could be developed. And on those 8 acres, you could have 48 units of a multi-use. You could have potentially 48 units on 8 acres. Is that correct? Because that's changing the whole character of the whole entire neighborhood. And growing up in Geneva, I do not want to see the people that are there, they're so worried and they feel so insecure right now that the landscape and the zoning is going to change and affect the reason why they bought their homes out there. And I don't want to see that happen. And I think that there's a lot of confusion going on right now. And I feel like we're just talking in circles. I honestly feel like I'm talking to a car salesman. You say one thing, but then after it confuses the facts that you make beforehand. And there's no clarity here. And it needs to be streamlined so we all understand this, because there's a lot of uncertainties here that could affect the people who specifically bought in this area years ago. And they're very scared that it's going to change the character of their neighborhood. And I do not want to see that happen, especially for mixed use, where it changes the whole dynamics of that area.
So the only thing, that's all obviously a part of the conversation. I mean, we're not trying to dismiss your concerns. We are trying to work this in to what, we're hearing in terms of potential for development. And what I can say is, as proposed, in that 24 acres, if it were to be subdivided and developed, anything that is adjacent to existing single family larger lots has to be existing single family larger lots. It cannot be multifamily adjacent to single family.
Okay, so in the interest of time, I'm just still trying to keep us streamlined. We still have a long list of people who want to talk. Michael Bogan, you're next, if you want to go.
Would you, I sent you a photo.
Yeah, you should be able to
Okay.
screen share.
Okay. Now, okay. So I can share now.
Yep. Yeah, you're fine to go.
Okay. Okay, folks, just one moment. Everybody see that? So this is a scale model I built of just a section of Slosson Lane, and where there is one house on each of the lots, you can see that's what is. Now, if the housing is changed to low density, what's currently called low density, proposed as low density, 4,000 square foot lots, then the development that I show between the houses that exist now is possible. There are open lots. I mean, for example, there are side lots. People have 2 or 3 lots. And then what happens is people die, the house is sold and a developer buys it. And so you've got this possibility. This is a real possibility. And so if it's switched to low density, which by the way is the wrong name for it, it's high density. It's not low density. It may be relatively so, but in fact, it's really high density. This is a scale model, 3/8 of an inch to 10 feet. This is what it could look like. This is just, and this is very different than what you're talking about on the other side of the proposed buffer. But in fact, if that is, you say that those things are, can only be, satisfy the standards for low density as proposed, then that could look the same as this. Now the other thing is, there's been what seems to me a problem of the proposal being somewhat in the academic realm and the reality being something else. That is, there's not a concern for a dense buildup of population and the traffic that produces. And that's sort of pushed ahead for, site plan and subdivision, secret review. But the fact is, the incentives are all in favor of the densest development possible. That's what developers want. That's what they'll bargain with the city for. And unless the limitations are maintained in the zoning law, developers will bulldoze their way through everything else. I have friends who are developers, and this is what they do. Fighting cities that's just part of the job. And they spend a lot of money and they have good lawyers, and that's the way it's done. So in a way, what you're doing is, it's academic, but the reality is being pushed aside. So the possible density of traffic is a major problem. I don't know if you've calculated the range of the number of families that might live in this area after it's fully built out. But whatever it is, 200, 300, 500 families, a typical family makes 10 trips a day by car. That's, you agree. It's those are federal studies show that. So, and then at particular peak times of day, you've got incredible density of traffic generated by that kind of density of living. And there's no protection for us. The only outlet, which is a potential outlet, I'm not even sure it's a viable outlet, onto 14. That's somewhat debatable. People say it is. I'm not quite sure. The road itself is too small now, and there's no room to open it up on the cemetery side, because the graves are built right up to the edge of the road. And the other side is privately owned, and unless part of it's taken by eminent domain, I don't know how you have a road which is adequate for emergency vehicles. So there's a problem there. And even if in fact that is a viable access and exit, you still have a tremendous development in this area, and the only other outlet on SLOSSON Lane. And at peak times of day, people are not going to wait on long lines to try and get out on a busy road like 14. They're going to take SLOSSON Lane. And to just keep pushing aside, well, traffic, we can deal with that. I've heard that comment made several times. The site plan, the subdivision plan, those things will take this into account. Well, I don't trust it, because the incentives are against denying development.
That's right.
And the other thing is, I want to back up what Leslie was saying. If this South Lake area is not suffering from the same kind of problem of houses not being conforming, why ever would we change the zoning and create this possibility? I mean, the possibility of the model I've showed. I mean, developers could really do that. And just simply for the sake of streamlining the zoning code, to risk ruining a neighborhood, it doesn't seem like, the cost is worth the gain. So I'm very concerned, and I really want you to just leave the zoning as it is for this area.
Please.
Sure. Well, I appreciate the model here and the demonstration of the vacant lots that are LDR or low density residential on SLOSSON, and that's a great point, and definitely something that we'll bring up and have a conversation about.
And just adding to what Mike was saying very capably, is half of the road on SLOSSON Lane is owned by the town and half is the city. But I don't know whether the town has been involved in the traffic planning for what's going to happen if you have 600 or 800 people living back there. But there's no room for sidewalks. You can't widen the road without going into people's living rooms, because the lots are not that far back, particularly on the town side where the houses drop off or the lots drop off. This is a traffic nightmare in the making. There's no reason to have a foot in the door, just like Mike said. Keep the door shut so this doesn't happen.
Sure, I got it, appreciate that, making note of it, but I do want to clarify, there's no possibility of 600 to 800 units.
whatever there is. You know, you have to be very careful that the traffic is going to be a major, major issue.
Can we
And there are no
possibly-
sidewalks, so people walk on the streets all the time with their children and their dogs.
Okay.
Well, one thing to keep in mind in terms of traffic, and we're not, and thank you for all the comments. But the one thing to keep in mind is that the potential for what could be there. You're right, there's no sidewalks currently on those roads, and I don't know the right of way off the top of my head. But one of the things that's a characteristic of a lot of these mixed density developments is the internal circulation roads have sidewalks, and the internal circulation roads that are built and online will have those kinds of amenities or facilities. So, you know, just leave yourself open to the possibility that the internal circulation could bring pedestrian and bicycle accommodations that aren't currently there on the main roads.
That is a new requirement as part of the proposed code.
Okay, and just another note, can we just pause on kind of interjections? Everyone that's on this call has time allotted for them to speak. So I just want to make sure everybody kind of has an equal share of conversation. All right, next up we have Darlene, if you're ready to go.
Yes, hi everybody. My name is Darlene Tritek and I do live here on SLOSSON Lane. I'm not going to say anything new that my other neighbors here have not already said. But definitely my concern is for the change in the character. Although I understood Molly's description about the buffer and not having homes, you know, that have lower square footage than what is currently here, but definitely very strongly concerned about the increase in traffic. So I just want that to go on record as one of my concerns and add it to the pile. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Darlene. James, are you ready to go up next? Seems like you're muted. I don't know if you're.
Not picking up.
Got you. We got you.
Got you now? Okay. I don't
Yep.
know why it wasn't picking up. It kept saying it was unmuted. Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Jim Oswald. I live on J Street. I know everybody's been talking about SLOSSON and traffic and all that, but where does all SLOSSON traffic end up? J Street. J Street is not conducive to a ton of traffic. Okay, so I know you've heard that. There's not much I was going to say. I think the Bonders, I know I may say some people's names wrong and I apologize. The Bogans, everybody, Mr. Whalen, Miss Hab, Leslie there, and the last Darlene said it all. I don't understand why. I have no trouble with development if the whole property back there that's left back there is just like our characteristic single family homes. We had this discussion many years ago when Rich Rising was the city manager and they tried to change this. And everybody complained and the city did not change it. And it needs to stay the way it is. But again, like I said, I don't have any trouble with homes. I don't understand why you want to redevelop my next door neighbor's house into this. Somebody could knock the house down, a developer could knock it down and build. Now, I know you just said what you said, that no, there's buffers and there's this. And if the land is what it is, they can't build. If there's already a house right next to it, they can't build all these homes. But as Mr. Bogan just said, these people, these developers have lawyers that will change anything they want to get what they need. And that's my biggest concern. I moved here 33 years ago and we looked for a house. I loved where I lived because I was in a city, but yet I had country. If I wanted to have somebody where I can hand out my cup of coffee through a window to, I would have lived in a big city. I'm deathly afraid of seeing what I see when I go through Toronto, buildings on top of buildings. You can't even tell the difference between condos and what homes is whose. That has taken over agricultural land like we have back here. I truly love the fact that we have agricultural. For many years, we've had horses even on J Street up by White Springs. I don't think they have the horses anymore. So I'm totally against why we're trying to bring the property sizes down to match the rest of the city. I am truly in agreement that the property sizes, mine's 30,000. I thought everybody was. I thought it was 100 by 300 feet deep, but I didn't realize Slosson wasn't that deep. But they should be all of the same character. If you want to build that whole area, make them, if you want to go with a half a acre, make them all a half an acre. Don't allow anything less than that. Thank you.
Thanks, James. Next up, I have on our list, Michael Bourgeois, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Looks like we don't have you hooked up to audio. I can go to the next person if you want to kind of figure it out. Michael, you can call in from phone too if you don't have a mic hooked up on your computer. You are by phone, okay. Let me see. Michael, why don't you leave by phone and then try calling back in, and then we'll get you after the next person if that works. Okay, thanks. All right, so next up we have Trish Miller.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yep, you're good.
Hi, I'm John. I'm Trisha's husband. We live on Slosson Lane. We're on the town side of the street. But we'd just like to say that it would be a travesty to have any building going on behind the homes on the city side of Slosson. I guarantee you no one, yourselves included, wants to see a house going up when they look out their window and they're looking either at Glenwood Cemetery or at a beautiful field or at trees and greenery. I think the place should stay as is. It's beautiful. Any development back there is just going to be more traffic. You know, Slosson, and I'm sure the same for Jay and Snell. It's high traffic area as it is, and as you know, in the spring and summertime, there's tons of people walking dogs, people with strollers with little kids, babies, people jogging. It's, you know, it's a wonderful area. People come here for that. You know, it's not people that live here like us. I don't think anybody wants that development going on. I certainly don't. I think I speak for my wife as well. And that's it. Thank you for your time.
Thanks. All right, Michael, I think you should be all set if you want to go now.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So, my wife has lived here since 1963. I don't think anybody on the listening has been that old on the board or the developers, but we were here when most of the houses were not here on Slosson Lane. And we love what we have. We do not want to see it destroyed. I love in our backyard. When this meeting started, I had a one-horn buck eating around in my backyard. I've had up to 12 deer in my backyard. I've had hawks screaming by. I love the wildlife. I've seen fox, groundhogs, rabbits. You know, that's all going to go away. You're going to destroy the agricultural, what I've seen. I've not seen a bobcat, but I can tell you I saw his footprints out in the where they plow the out there for the corn. The geese, I've had a flock of over 300 fly over the house. It was just it was a moment I want to repeat. It was beautiful. and I'll you know, I will miss all the everything that's, you know, the agricultural portion of it. Development, to trade that for development is not worth it in my opinion. Again, the traffic is unacceptable. The people that walk by, the joggers, especially with this COVID thing, there's been a tremendous increase of walkers, myself included, my wife and I, and we just want to see it remain as it is. That's my opinion, and everybody else. And again, I'll agree with that. The wetness, believe me, I cannot mow the back half of my lawn until the end of June. So it gets really extremely wet back there, even with that buffer, even with the hedgerow that's there now. It doesn't absorb it until late June, until the leaves pop. So anyway, that's our say on it. We just don't want it changed. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Okay, Leslie, you're up.
I also wanted to thank our counselor for organizing this meeting with you all. I think this is really helpful to give feedback. I did want to say, I think I wanted to echo what Frank said, is that I understand that what you've tried to do is accommodate us by creating this buffer and then this like zone where it's going to be, you know, single family homes, and then we're going to gradually become higher density as we get closer to Route 14. And that you've now created a whole other zone district called MR2, which is different than MR1. And I think it's getting really confusing, you know, and I think when it's confusing and unclear, then it does give a little a way for developers to push what they want. And Mike really said it. He said all of the interests, the city needs money in tax dollars, the developers want to make money, so they want the highest density housing, like everything is working in this one direction. And I think all of these kind of confusing and special cases and stipulations that you're creating makes this opportunity for what you're telling us to, what the fixes that you're trying to make end up not being the reality of what will happen, which is the maintenance, having a kind of neighborhood in Geneva that is more rural and agricultural and the lot sizes are bigger. Like, and it is inconsistent with this idea that we want a variety of different kinds of housing in Geneva. And like, this is one kind of housing, and the rezoning that you've chosen where all lot sizes, the biggest lot size that you have is 4,000 square feet. Like, you've completely gotten rid of this one category of houses, which are the ones that we live in. And I think that that's a mistake if you want to have a variety of different kinds of housing. And the only other thing I would say is that, like, I do understand the thing that you said in the beginning is that there are these trends that, you know, people want smaller properties, people don't want to deal with their yard anymore and stuff like that. And that trends are moving in that direction. And I would say that in my experience, what people want is access to stuff. They want to walk out of their door and get to the lake. They want to walk out of their door and get to the grocery store. They want to, you know what I mean? Walk out of their door and go to the pub, whatever. And like, that's not this area. Do you know what I mean? Like, you still have to get in your car and you have to drive to the Wegmans. You have to get on Route 14 or get on SLOSSON Lane, and there's no cut through and there's no walkways and there's no access to the lake. It's like, it's not really the area that gives the thing that I think people want from these smaller, you know, houses is access to things. I mean, I think that's why the lakefront, the solar village is really quite successful, is because they are smaller little houses. And yet what it is the access to downtown Geneva and the access to the lake that makes them so attractive. And so I think that trying to just create higher density housing in a place like the South Lake neighborhood isn't actually really what people want out of their higher density housing. And I think that's why it's a better fit for that MR1 district that you're talking about, where people up there seem to want that MR that mixed residential zoning, and we kind of don't. And so I think, I just think I just think it's a mistake, and that there should be a part of Geneva, the South Lake neighborhood, basically, that has these larger lot sizes and this agricultural residential zoning. And it should be simple and easy for us to understand and clear, rather than the kind of the thing that you're trying to, accommodate us, but it's just getting more confusing. And that's all.
Yeah, and I totally appreciate that, and I'm sorry that you're looking at one thing and we're now talking about something else. So we hear you. We're gonna work with council and make these changes, and we do hope to make this more clear. I know right now it's hard to understand because it's not actually in the code for you to reference. So like I said, there will be changes to this area. We will have this conversation with council, considering all of the points that have been brought up tonight. We're not throwing any of this out. This is all about all going to be a piece of the conversation, and you will be able to see, and hopefully we're going to work really hard to try and make sure it's very clear to you. So this is sort of the interim, and it's awkward, I know, and I apologize for that. But certainly, like we said before, we will make revisions. We're working with council, and you will have an opportunity to look at those again and let us know, did we address concerns? Are there still things, that maybe need to be considered and talked through with council?
And the nice thing going forward, I mean, as Molly said, the next version will be clearer, but clear doesn't mean you have to agree with it. So, and doesn't mean it's going to happen. So the reality is, it's very easy. Molly and I are pretty good at what we do. So it's very easy for us to say, if council ultimately says, John, the existing AR district should be the law of the land going forward. That's easy for us. We're technicians. We can make that change very simply. But we will clarify what we've done to date, so council can chew on it, and then ultimately it'll be their call. So, I mean, again, we can't thank you enough for the time. And I just want to iterate that, Molly and I are, as practitioners, as planners, as our code of ethics and how we approach our practice, we have no agenda here. Our opinion doesn't matter anywhere other than where we live. I live in the Village of Hilton. Molly lives in the city of Rochester. Our opinions matter there. Our job for Geneva is to distill everything we've heard to get you the best code we can provide you, and to get you the code that's going to make sure that your community continues to improve over the next 10 or 20 years. Sometimes improvement means staying the same. Sometimes improving means maybe on middle street having some kind of new housing that allows you to look at the river or the lake, excuse me. So, that's our goal, that's our charge, and we'll continue to work with the community to do that. And we'll convey, when I say we, Molly and I, Katie, will convey everything we've heard to council going forward. And
next up, we have Max, and then that's the last of our listed speakers. So then, Tom, do you mind if after Max, we'll go to you?
Sure.
Okay, Max, you're up.
Okay, thank you. I think most of the things that I wanted to say have already been iterated. Agricultural, please, because that is what we're so dependent upon. Traffic is another concern that I have, major proportions. I was interested that Mr. Steinmetz was talking about pathways down in the area that would be safe for pedestrians and so forth. However, for someone like my wife and myself, my wife is about to have a hip replacement. If we are on the level, that's fine, but the drop in elevation from the front of our SLOSSON to our property edge at the beginning of our fields, going east, there's such a drop that we might get down, but we wouldn't be getting back up again, or at least she wouldn't. So we're essentially, when we go walking, we'll be walking on SLOSSON. So the traffic remains a major issue, even if there are other places where other people who are more fit and younger are able to get around. So those are the main things that I'm concerned about. The property taxes are a major issue here. That's a different conversation and a different time to be just discussing that. But one of the values of the property here on SLOSSON Lane for all of us has been the quiet and the peace, by and large, most of the time. You know, if we have a major traffic issue, that devalues the property, and therefore that's a loss of revenue if things are being done fairly. So I really think that we need to say things don't change, and let's try and keep it the way it is. You've got the mixed agricultural residential with large lots if someone wants to develop there, but I don't know why they would, because they need to have the houses on stilts to have a dry basement. So I think that's about it. And I want to thank Mary Bogan and Mr. Bogan and Dr. Bogan for the tremendous work that they've done, because they were the ones who really got the whole neighborhood going, and I do appreciate that enormously. And my gratitude to you.
Thanks. So right before we go to Tom, I did get a question on our live chat from Pat Mahoney. He goes, are Slosson Lane et al. And Middle Street the only areas that will be affected by this zoning change, other than making other lots in compliance with the code? So Middle Street and then this area that we have been talking about in Ward 1 are the only areas that were proposed with the December 10th version of the draft as mixed residential. So if you need to refer to our zoning code update, or if you're not familiar with it, or if this is the first time you're hearing about it, you can go to our city website at cityofgenevany.com. There's going to be a button that says zoning code update. That's going to have the draft, our most recent draft that Molly and John are referring to. It's from December 10th, and it has the map that Molly and John have been referencing that shows all of the districts that we've kind of been discussing. So again, the mixed residential that was proposed in the December 10th draft is just on the Middle Street and just in this area of Ward 1 that we're talking about.
There's one tiny spot with existing apartments that it does apply to, but that's, I mean, it's basically just reflecting what's there. The other thing, and I just want to make this clear to, if you haven't accessed it yet, and if you have looked at it, again, everything that we've talked about tonight in terms of the adjustments that we're considering with council, we will also include everything we've heard here tonight, but you will not see those in that draft. So that doesn't mean they're not proposed or they're not under for consideration. It's just that we had not had this conversation yet by the December 10th draft. So you won't see like the buffer, for example, in there. But that doesn't mean it's not under consideration.
Thanks. Tom, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. I want to thank John and Molly and Katie for bringing all of this together, and also thank everyone that participated. But I want to talk about agriculture for a minute, and specifically to John and Molly. If the current zoning went through, what would happen to agriculture? Because I don't believe that agriculture is mentioned in any of the proposed zones.
Correct.
So
as drafted, no.
So what would happen?
Any existing primary agricultural use. So this doesn't mean someone who on their property maybe has a garden or keeps animals currently. This draft would not prohibit that. But if you had a primary agricultural operation under this code, it would be considered pre-existing non-conforming. So it would be allowed to continue on essentially until it is one day abandoned. But we can look at that, obviously.
So, and that's exactly why I asked this question. What is the definition of agricultural abandonment? How long would there not be agriculture for then there would be no agricultural activity ever? Similar to how horses are allowed in the city of Geneva. All right. So if you're not an AR and you had a horse, you could keep that horse. But as soon as the horse went away, you're done. No more horses.
No.
So I want to talk about agriculture specifically. Mm-hmm. I really do need an answer to that question. Mm-hmm. And when you stop agriculture, how long do you have to be stopped before it can no longer happen?
Okay. So I want to make clear, and it's not in this current draft, but that has been brought to our attention, the keeping of horses, or a cow or whatever. There are, and we know, and we've found it in the code. That's something that we will be bringing into this draft. So that is not going to go away. That is something that will be maintained through the code. It's just the listing of an agricultural use. Again, as to speak with the time frame. So again, if it's an entire parcel that is, planted, tilled, and harvested every year, that's a conversation for how we define the abandonment of a use. I can't quote off the top of my head what your code says right now. We will likely have it be consistent with that, but we can work that through with you, Tom, and council as well.
And so that gets to my major point in that agriculture is alive and well in the city of Geneva. And it is alive and well right here on SLOSSON Lane. In the early comments that agriculture may go away is totally unrealistic when we are talking about this area of our city. So agricultural residential can also be a marketing tool when someone is selling their home, because it's the way it is right now. And that's very, very attractive for every single person that I'm seeing on my screen tonight, and person that is living on SLOSSON Lane, because they live in an agricultural residential zone. And that is a choice that I believe our municipality wants, because it's a housing option. So if you come up with an MR2, it has to include agriculture. So we eliminate any possible abandonment need, okay? And it's just the right thing to do. So if you can pull up the map that showed the green buffer zone for me. And I have a quick question about the green buffer zone, and that is, are roads allowed in a green buffer zone?
No.
Roads not allowed. Okay, so that's fine. So we talk about transitional zoning, and when we talk about transitional zoning specifically in this area, which is why I want you to pull this slide up, I think we're talking about low density on that specific parcel. And then on another parcel, we conveniently have that labeled mixed medium density. So would it not make sense that perhaps these two parcels would be zoned differently? Because south of the low density, all the way over to Snell, is pretty much all the same area. South of the lot of the federal wetlands, that's mixed medium density, is completely different. So I think what we're trying to eliminate here, which you've heard it several times on the atmosphere of developers in the 21st century, is we want zoning to eliminate wiggle room. We don't want any wiggle room for a developer to come in and tell the municipality with a strong arm what they're going to do. So I'm thinking that, I like the idea of an MR2. I like the idea of Cooper's Woods as open space. And by the way, I talked to the college's attorney this morning. I know what the plan is, but I think that we probably should consider that these two lots, perhaps be a different zone, and it might actually temper possibly some of the comments that you heard tonight on the people that live on SLOSSON Lane.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, and
I just want to stress that agriculture is alive and well, and to think that it may go away is quite unfounded, because since soil was invented, there's actually been agriculture on SLOSSON Lane.
Okay.
And I just think it's terribly unrealistic to think that that's going to go away based on the conditions of the area.
Sure.
So And I also wanted to mention just to everyone that this is not the public's last chance to weigh in. So in order for council to vote on this, there has to be a public hearing. So this meeting was set up specifically for the Middle Street area and the Slosson Lane area. But this is not the last hurrah. There's going to be plenty of revisions to this third working draft.
Yes.
I think we're working on right now. This is the third draft.
Yes.
And thanks to John and Molly, they've actually taken into the public's, they've taken in the comments of the public, and that's why we're on the third revision. There could be a fourth or fifth revision. So everyone in our community has an opportunity to also come to the public hearing, which is before the council is going to make a decision.
Mhm.
So I like many of the things that were proposed, and I'm really happy with the consultants in that they actually beat us to the switch and realize that this area is completely different from Middle Street. And you heard us loud and clear, and I thank you very much for that.
You know, one thing I'll piggyback on what Tom said. And
John, do you mind if I just jump in real quick?
go ahead. You're the boss.
I got a simultaneous text and email from Sage, Neil Brayman, and John Brennan. It's 2 years to answer your question, Tom, about the period between, if it's pre-existing non-conforming, it's a 2-year abandonment. So thank you to the 3 people who all responded at once with that answer.
Yeah. So that's very good. It's not a reason not to have agriculture in though, because 2 years goes by very quickly.
The older I get, Tom, the quicker it goes.
I'm with you.
Just to follow up on what Tom said, a couple things. One, we do a lot of this. And I want to give the city a lot of credit. I mean, we've had, public hearings are required. These conversations aren't, but we feel these conversations are incredibly important. So we've had conversations like this with the Historic Districts and Structures Committee. We've had 2 conversations like this with the Business Improvement District on the draft code. We've talked with yourselves, and that's on top of all the stakeholder meetings and the committee meetings and all the meetings we've had over the
And
last.
written comments on the
Yeah.
October draft, and the comments that we're getting now on the December draft.
Yeah, I mean, the city's really gone above and beyond, and just in terms of, I just want to give a plug for Tom. I mean, Tom's been involved in some of the committee meetings and some of the other conversations. And we deal with a lot of elected officials, and Tom's been excellent throughout this process. He's represented his constituents extremely well. I'm not saying the other ones haven't, but Tom's been the one we've seen, and he's been one of the liaisons to the committee. So it's not a slight on the other committee members at all, the other council members at all, but Tom's been part of the committee, and
As well as the mayor.
Exactly. Yeah, been really good stewards in this process. So we appreciate that, because not every community has those type of council members that are that involved.
It's not, I mean, we don't like it when, we have legislative boards that aren't as engaged as council has been. And that's really something, like John said in the very beginning, this isn't coming from us. This isn't something that we're trying to make work for us. Our opinions work outside of this. We're trying to translate what we hear from you into a workable legal framework through zoning. And I just want to point out and say, Tom, too, with everything that we've heard and some of the sort of middle grounds and potential considerations that we've talked about, it's our plan when we come and work with you next with council is to present these options in a way that you can sort of look at them. Like we said before, it's a spectrum. So we can talk through the various increments and modifications that have been brought up.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. I mean, I think if we go till midnight, we might beat council's record that they did this summer for longest meeting. So I don't know if anyone's on board with that, but I appreciate everyone for participating. Again, I know we kind of had to change up the style that we were doing, but we did make it through the meeting successfully without getting Zoom bombed. So props to us for having that. So again, the zoning code is on our website. As Molly mentioned, that is the version from December. So it won't have everything that was talked about at this meeting. They are currently working on the third version of it. reach out to council, any of your counselors with any questions. You can reach out to me too if you have any questions. I can pass it along to Molly and John. And again, thanks everyone so much for participating. And I hope it was informative and helpful for everyone.
Katie, if it's helpful, we can also PDF the slides we had tonight, if people want to refer to those too.
Yeah, that works. We can put that right on the page that has all the other zoning information for anyone who wants to get it. Oh, Joan, do you want to have the last word?
Yeah, I just wanted to know, thank you for everybody for participating. Oops.
You had it, you were unmuted first. You're muted now.
Okay, thanks for everybody and your comments. I just had a question. So when do we know the next meeting where this will be discussed? The rest of the website?
Yeah, we're still kind of working with council. We've slowed down the process. We are looking tentatively right now. As I mentioned, like everything's still tentative, but it would be a couple months before we get the next draft pushed out for the next kind of comment period. But again, that's tentative. Council could make the decision to slow the process down even further. But I would say that we're not speeding it up. So it would probably be in the next couple months, but not anytime like next week or anytime super soon.
And I just had one quick question about zoning, and maybe this is not even in the realm of zoning, but you know how everybody's taste is subjective. Like what I think would look nice is different from somebody else. There's no way you can write that into a zoning plan, like material use or, you know, you have like a trailer park look, you know, versus a stone buildings, you know what I'm saying? Like there's no way to really zone for that, right? Like
you can to a certain degree. So, you know, you can have consideration for materials and things. But like I said before, you know, you can't zone for owner versus renter. You can't zone without going into a very complex alternative from this for income level. But you can get into design, and I hope you'll take a look in the design section that will also be coming out, the revised section of that shortly. There are multifamily design considerations, and in the code, if you look to that section, it also speaks to, like I said before, if it's, you know, a 4-unit multifamily, how it looks, not saying that that's what we're talking about here, but the 4-family, you know, the design says make it look like a single family. So you're not looking at that high rise or apartment situation. And I had it, but I lost my train of thought on it. We dealt with design. What was the other question that we had?
Building material.
Building material, yes. Yes, we can do that as well.
Now, John, it's a good question. You don't see it as much in single family neighborhoods. There are residential design guidelines out there for single family homes. You don't see them too much in upstate New York. They're legal, you can do it.
Oh, I know what it was.
Generally speaking, communities tend to shy away from, not saying it's good or bad, not saying it's right or wrong. If some communities choose to do it, but most communities tend to shy away from regulating what private homes, materials and things like that should or could be.
Yeah, and some places look nicer than others, that's all. That's subjective, you know.
I did remember, so your comment about mobile homes. So again, to that standpoint, there are character considerations to reflect, obviously, like the homes that you have now, but zoning can't prohibit like manufactured homes, but that's to say this is not zoned as a mobile home park. So I want to make that clear, but the New York State Fair housing law does have restrictions. So like the city couldn't prohibit that. It's just a different conversation down the line. I just want to make that clear.
Not that there's anything wrong with trailer parks. I'm just saying sometimes you just have different opinions about what looks right for character. Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks. And if anyone's kind of jumping on the YouTube live stream right now, it will be saved on our YouTube channel. So you can go and watch this again if you need to refer to anything. And thank you everyone so much again for coming out and having the discussion with us.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.